Hey everybody, my name is Jakara Lewis, and I am the author of the Kids series TEAS Math Edition. Tonight I'm coming to you guys to talk about how to solve real world problems involving proportions. So I know sometimes you guys can get a lot of proportions on this test, just kind of depending on which test you actually get. And proportions in terms of setting up and solving, it's really easy, but I know again there are certain topics that kind of throw some people for a loop. And today I'm going to show you guys 3 different examples of 3 different ways they could present proportions to you. So as I've always mentioned, they give you guys a list of sub-skills that you are going to be exposed to during the test. The problem is that because the topics are so general, so in general this topic says solving real world problems involving proportions, but what it does not do is it does not specify, when we talk about proportions, how deep does it go? Give me examples of what that looks like, what all am I expected to execute, and of course, given the book, I solved that problem for you. So in reference to proportions, they're going to expect you to know how to do three things. It's the end of the day, so I'm a little woozy. But you have to know how to solve proportions given whole numbers. You also oh gosh, so tongue tied. You also have to know how to solve proportions given fractions and decimals. And I know that really throws people for a loop. And you also have to know how to solve proportions containing values of different units. So even though the idea of proportions is really easy, there are a couple different ways where they can increase the level of difficulty. And of course, I want to make sure you guys are prepped and ready for anything they throw at you. All right, so remember, this is cluster 2. This is going to be our second topic in cluster 2. Our first topic was ratios and rate of change. If you missed it, make sure you go back and you check it out, because as I mentioned, when I grouped the topics together in a cluster, it was because you could solve them in similar ways. So just as I show you guys proportions today, it's literally identical to how to identify a missing value given a ratio. Same exact math. They literally put you in the same exact scenarios. So it's going to give you the double dose of that particular practice, okay? All right, so example 1, and of course I'm reading all the examples from the book, just to kind of give you an idea of the type of material you'll be exposed to. So it says, Roman drives 150 miles on 15 gallons of gas. If he uses 25 gallons of gas, how far has he traveled? So you're going to set these up just like ratios. So proportional relationship is basically showing that values are equal in terms of how much has been pulled out. So if Roman drives 150 miles on 15 gallons of gas, that means that I can write a ratio of 150 miles over 15 gallons of gas. So this is what our ratio would look like. All right, the second part says if he uses 25 gallons, so if I'm treating it just like the ratios, that means in terms of my units, if I have miles on top here, because proportional basically means equal, miles on top has to be the same here, gallons on the bottom, which means I have to do gallons on the bottom over here. Now, one thing that people tend to bypass all the time is they want to fill in the numbers, but they don't want to write the units. The reason why I always recommend that you write the units is because it's very easy to make a mistake and put a number in the wrong place. And sometimes the math even comes out to where it seems like you have the right answer. And of course, that may not be the case in some instances. So it says if he uses 25 gallons of gas, how far has he traveled? Well, I know 25 gallons, that means that my 25 has to go here, which means I'm looking for the number of miles. So once you get in this setup, it's the same exact thing we did for solving for a missing value given a ratio. You're always going to cross multiply these 2 values, and of course it could be either way, and then you're always going to divide by whatever is left over. So if we do 150 times 25, that gives us 3,750. And then we're going to take the 3,750 and we're going to divide that by 15, which leaves us with 250 miles. So again, remember, when we talk about ratios, proportions, percentages, the biggest difference between the topics in this cluster and the topics in our first cluster is that they're going to give you guys word problems. And I know I've heard it 1,000 times over that word problems really give you guys a tough time, because sometimes it's hard to be able to decipher and pull that particular information out. So what do I always tell you guys? Make sure you create some type of trigger so that when you see a problem, you know exactly how to execute it. So the trigger for these questions as well as ratios is that if they give you 3 values to start with and you're looking for a 4th, you should automatically know this is the setup that I'm going to use. Cross, multiply, and divide. And it's that simple. Those are the kind of steps that you have to put in place so that you don't confuse yourself and that you don't overcomplicate it. Okay? All right, so let's try another one. All right, it says Benny can type 40 words per minute. So per is going to be a really important vocabulary word that you guys have to know, because per means for every one. So sometimes people may see that and say, oh, okay, it's 40 words per minute. If he types for 15 minutes, how many words will he have typed? So a normal person would say, oh, they only gave me 2 numbers. I thought it was supposed to be 3. But if you look at the key, it says he typed 40 words per minute. So that means if I write it out, that's 40 words for every 1 minute. All right, and of course we know on the opposite side, when we're dealing with ratios and proportions, if I have words on top over here, words has to be on top over here, miles on the bottom, minutes over on the bottom over here, and then minutes on the bottom over here, okay? And order doesn't matter. Even if I did 40 words on the bottom and 1 minute on top, as long as my units match, it doesn't matter which order you put it in, because it should. It will give you the same answer. It will give you the right answer. All right, so the second half says, if he types for 15 minutes, so I know 15 goes in the bottom. And of course, we put our question mark up top. So same thing, cross multiply to the bottom. So we're doing 40 times 15, which gives us, what? 600. And then we always divide by what's left over. So if we do 600 divided by 1, that's going to give us 600 words. And of course, you want to make sure you always understand the context, because if you make a mistake, you'll be able to understand context-wise if it made sense, okay? And of course, if you guys have any questions as I'm going along, feel free to drop them in the comments. So right now, my iPad died, so I can't actually see the comments as I go, but I'm going to stop and I'll go back and forth to check, because I don't have my camera facing forward on my phone. But you guys just bear with me. Oh, yeah. All right, so let's see. All right, so now we're going to move into the second example, which is solving proportions given a fraction or a decimal. So it's the same thing. What you guys are going to do is you're going to utilize that sub-skill of converting fractions, decimals, and percent. So I really emphasize that in my first few videos, because the first cluster gives you so many skills that you guys are going to use throughout the book, throughout the testing. You want to make sure that you master those, especially if you're given a fraction. People always see fractions and they just run the other way, but I always tell you the easiest thing to do is just convert it to a decimal. Because they give you the calculator, it makes it that much easier for you to put yourself in a better position. All right, so it says Stephanie uses 3.5 cups of sugar to bake 5 red velvet cakes. So what 2 things are we talking about? We're talking about cups of sugar, and we're talking about red velvet cakes. It says, how many cakes can she bake with 9 cups of sugar? So let's go ahead and set my ratios up. So I always kind of like to write it out like this. So I know I have one ratio over here, and I have something else over here. And of course, one of the values is going to be missing. So what 2 things are we talking about? We're talking about sugar, cups of sugar, and we're talking about cakes. So I do recommend that you write your units out first, so that it's easier to plug your numbers in, so you're not overthinking it. I know a lot of people always try to bypass this particular step, and it really just makes it a lot easier. So I know the 2 things I'm talking about cups of sugar and cakes. So I go ahead and I set it up so I can go back and plug my numbers in. So if we reread the question, it says Stephanie uses 3.5 cups of sugar to bake 5 red velvet cakes. So I can do 3.5 up here, 5 cakes here. All right, it says if she bakes 11 cakes, so I know 11 goes here, which means my question mark goes here. It says how many cups of flour will she need? Okay, so first things first. We need to get rid of this fraction, because I know when you guys see fractions, it just completely throws you off. So if you remember way back when from our converting fractions and decimals, whenever I have a mixed number, which is a whole number and a fraction, I zoom in on my fraction and I just convert that to a decimal. So 1/2 as a decimal is going to be 0.5, which means I can change this to 3.5. All right, and I'm doing the same thing I normally do. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to cross multiply. So I'm doing 3.5 times 11, which gives me, oh wait, Lord, my bad, 3.5, 5, it was 9. That's why I'm like, what? It was 9 cakes. That was my mistake. I was reading a wrong question. All right, so we do 3.5 Oh, Lord. I'm so sorry, y'all. I'm so tired. All right, let me read the question again. All right, it says, Stephanie can use 3.5 cups of sugar to bake 5 red velvet cakes. So we did decide. It says, how many cakes can she bake with 9 cups of sugar? So 9 goes on top. So you see how I just made that mistake that fast? That's why it's so important that you pay attention to every single little thing. And I'm tired. And I know some of you guys study while you're tired. And you make mistakes, and it's really frustrating. So that's why I always say you should be pumped, you should be full of energy, and you should be focused, because if you start to make mistakes like this, it's going to pull your confidence down, and it's going to put you in a space to where you're not really going to believe in yourself, and it's just going to kill your whole vibe. All right, so in this instance, we'll multiply this way. So we're going to do 5 times 9, which is 45, and we're going to divide by what's left over, which is our 3.5. So 45 divided by 3.5 gives us 12.8 cakes. All right, so that was definitely a mistake worth making, because as you guys can see, when you get a little fatigued, you definitely start to make really small mistakes. So as you guys can see, I did the setup correctly, but I didn't. Well, I did the setup halfway correctly, but I wasn't able to execute it fully because I made a very small mistake, okay? And I know sometimes you guys get tired. A lot of you guys have kids, you have jobs, but you're going to have to learn how to manage your time, and you're going to have to learn how to section it off so that you have time for yourself to be able to focus. You know what I mean? And just to put it into perspective, like, you got to realize that once you get into your nursing program, you're going to have to study 10 times harder than what you're studying for this test. So you have to be able to make sure that you make time for those particular things so it's not really hard for you. Okay? All right, and then roll it into our last example. So this is going to be solving proportions using 2 different units. So sometimes they put you in a scenario where you may start with 1 unit, but they want to answer in another unit. And you have to make sure you catch that, because sometimes people get so caught in the trigger. They see the 3 numbers, they plug them in, and they solve. They're not realizing that the units have changed. So, for example 3, it says, Angela can type 400 words in 8 minutes. Okay, so that's my first ratio, because we're going to go ahead and set it up, because what are we talking about? We're talking about words and minutes. So I want to go ahead and fill in my proportions, ratios. Because you're always going to ask yourself, what 2 things are they talking about? If you put yourself in that particular position, it won't be difficult for you to fill it in. So if it says Angela can type 400 words in 8 minutes, okay, I know I can go ahead and set up my ratios, right? I'm going to do 400 at the top. And then we're going to do 8 at the bottom. All right, it says, at this rate, how many words can she type in 1 hour? So, boom, that's a problem. They want to know, how many words can she type in 1 hour? Well, ooh, Lord, we know that our unit is going to be in minutes. So, I can't plug this 1 hour into my minute section. So what I'm going to have to do is I'm going to have to change that. So we know, and these are going to be common conversions that you should already be aware of if you do get this, that there are 60 minutes in 1 hour. So now I can take the 60 and I can go ahead and fill that in there. From there, we go ahead and we cross multiply. So we're going to do 400 times 60, which gives us 24,000. And then remember, we always divide by the number that's left over. So if we do 24,000 divided by 8, that gives us 3,000. 3,000 words. And there you go. All right, so as you guys can see, setting up proportions is fairly simple, but it is very easy to make a mistake just in so many ways. There's so many small things that you guys need to be able to pay attention to. And again, one of the amazing things about the book, that there are over 1,400 practice questions that were individually created by me. And I want to make sure that I put you guys in a variety of situations at a variety of different levels of difficulty, so that when you get to your test, you're not bombarded by things you haven't seen. You don't feel like the test is harder than you actually practice. And I do feel like a lot of the content that I provided in the book is much harder than what you'll see. I'm a true believer in practicing a little bit harder than what's expected. So when you get to your test, you're like, oh, this is nothing. You know, I don't want you to get to your test and you're super flustered and you're super stressed out, because that defeated the purpose of studying. And of course, I always tell people the reason why most people are super nervous during tests is because they're really unsure of themselves. They're really unsure. I'm doing something.
Oh, yeah.
They're really unsure of themselves. And that's because they don't really have confidence in what they're doing. So if you guys notice, even with kids, when kids are really confident and they know they're gonna get something right, they won't stand down. They just have it. But when people are really unsure, then they kind of teeter and they're not confident. And the only way that you can really build that confidence up is if you continuously practice. And I know that that's how math is. That's probably why I've always been so successful in math, because when I was growing up, I did math all the time. I just really loved doing it. I love practicing it. And anytime I was met with a topic that was really difficult for me, like, I did it until I got it. And that's just what you have to do. So if you're just tuning in, or if you catch the video after I post it, today we covered solving real world problems involving proportions. So there are 3 different scenarios that you could possibly be in when it comes to solving proportions. They could give you a proportion with whole numbers, they can give you a proportion with decimals and fractions, or they can give you proportions with 2 different units. So of course, given the practice, I definitely want you guys to be able to recognize when you're in that scenario so that you know how to solve. The biggest thing is that the setup doesn't change, but there may be small conversions you may have to make in order to get your final result. For this particular section, I included 70 practice questions, and of course it breaks it down by each category, and it gives you a mixed review, of course, to make sure that you understand how to do it. I cannot stress enough how important it is for you guys to have the practice proper materials. I know a lot of the times when you purchase certain books, it kind of has you all over the place, and it doesn't really give you a really good pace, or it doesn't really organize it in the correct way, because topics are all everywhere. So, all over the place, or all everywhere. So, of course, if you are interested in the Kids Series TEAS Math Edition, you can definitely inbox me so I can send you an unofficial copy. Right now, we are still going through printing the samples before I do a major print, just so I can make sure that I'm happy with everything, of course. But so far, the minimum score that we've seen is a 75% in the math section, and the highest score we've seen is a 100%. So I'm definitely confident that anyone can pass, but we never make guarantees, because everybody's study habits are different. So it's all, you get out of it exactly what you put in it, So if you really study hard, you're really honest with yourself, and you do everything you need to do, then there's no reason why you shouldn't get the score that you got. All right, so that's going to wrap up our second section of Cluster 2. So tomorrow, the very last section, which is a big one because it contains tons of topics, is going to be solving real world problems involving percentages. So percentages is such a big topic. I know that people tend to have a really tough time with percentages because there's so many different ways that they could present it to you. We talk about percent increase, percent decrease. We talk about tax, tip, and discount. We talk about percent markups, percent markdowns, percent proportions. I mean, there's so many different ways that they could display it to you. So I probably would end up breaking that down into 2 videos, just because it's so many topics and there are so many example problems. I think I have about 12 or 13 different ones, and I want to make sure that you guys are getting the gist of it. Thank you so much to everybody who added themselves to the group today. Of course, I want to keep you guys engaged on a regular basis, so I'm going to be posting every day just to get some good feedback from you guys. Any topics that you guys are really struggling with, please make sure you drop a comment, or you drop a question so that I can get with you. Anything that I've done so far in terms of topics, and I missed anything that you've seen or anything that you may have a question about, feel free to drop it in the comments. Feel free to inbox me, because of course my job is to not only help to push the book, but really my sole goal is to make sure that you guys pass your test. Anybody who knows me personally, they know that even prior to the book, that was always my biggest thing, is making sure that people get the right help so that they can make their dreams come true. So I apologize, of course, for my very lazy tongue, but I am exhausted. This is my 3rd video today, and of course it just takes so much energy to talk and write. But I'm getting practice for my official YouTube videos, so anything you guys see that you like or you don't like, please let me know, because I want to make sure they're perfect for YouTube, so everybody has access to it, and we can keep glowing and keep growing as a tight-knit TEAS community, and we'll just go from there. So I'll see you guys tomorrow. Make sure you're interacting, keeping up with comments. inboxing, conversating with your other group members so we can go ahead and get these files built up and we can just go from there. So thank you guys. See you tomorrow.